Hey guys, Coffee with Brodes is back starting March 28th, which is opening day. Join the Brodes Media membership here on YouTube for $4.99 a month, and you will have access to Coffee with Brodes live streams every Monday and Thursday at 11 a.m. It'll be laid back, super chill, and very interactive with the chat. Also, there's a Brodes Media Discord channel too that is currently active, where we will communicate when games are going live and talking about all the action as it happens in real time. Nothing is changing with the current pods. This is just an added bonus if you want more of this obnoxious asshole in your life. I'm looking forward to starting with Coffee with Brodes live streams March 28th, and make sure if you're interested, you grab your membership today. Thank you all so much for the wild and crazy support. Can't wait. Looking forward to it. All right, enjoy the show.
Brodes Media.
What is going on, everybody? Good afternoon. Welcome on into Bleacher Report Live. And this is the way too early draft targets for the Philadelphia Eagles. And there's no doubt it has been a wild couple of weeks. A.J. Brown calls in the WIP. Marcus Hayes dropped a piece on the Inquirer today about how some guys in the locker room were held to a different standard than others. The list goes on and on. I mean, it has been a circus. It's been an emotional roller coaster, and this is what happens when you go through a historic collapse. We try and find out answers, and it didn't just happen out of nowhere. There's real truth to a lot of this, and it's probably a combination of it all, which then resulted into the debacle that was. But now we have to try and move forward. We're still looking for answers, but while we look for answers, we have to move forward, see what Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni are going to say at the Combine, because they have not spoke yet. They will shortly after this show is actually all wrapped up. But the question becomes, who do you look at and who do you try and target if you're Howie Roseman? And this will tie together with our Bleacher Report poll of the chat, and I'm sending that out now to all of you listening. What position do you think Howie Roseman drafts in round one? Not what position do you want, because I'd be looking at corner. I'd be looking at the linebacker position, even though they never look at the linebacker position at all. I don't know if I would necessarily want them to do that in round one, but I would want them to actually beef up the damn position, because it makes me sick watching nobodies like Morrow have the green dot on his helmet, and he's the one who's getting calls played or getting plays called into his helmet, and he now has to distribute it to the rest of the team like he's some hero, like he's some guy that's supposed to have a ton of power in your franchise. That dude was released how many times? Howie Roseman didn't want him, yet he's the one with the important sticker on his helmet. It's a disgrace. But what position do you think Howie drafts in round one? We're going to take a look at some of the mock drafts that have been released to the public, and they're mock drafts. It's version 3.0, version 5.0, version 7.0, you name it. There's so many different variations, so many different outlets with different media members who think the Eagles will go in all different sorts of directions. So it's way too early, but guess what? We have to start looking at it now, because the NFL never sleeps. Getting better and improving never sleeps. Okay, even with the salary cap going up, and now Howie Roseman has more money to work with, and he's able to operate differently. So can every other team. It's not like the Eagles have an advantage here. So does every other team, but that impacts a Hassan Reddick potential signing. And then what does that mean for what you target in the draft? There really are some difference-making moves that can happen because of the salary cap, and that's in play here as well. So your options are offensive line, defensive line, cornerback, or other. Those are your options on the poll, so you can definitely get your thoughts and chime in there. Let's start off with NFL.com. Daniel Jeremiah, who is a former Eagles scout, actually has up a mock draft, and with their first-round pick, they actually have your Philadelphia Eagles taking a cornerback out of Missouri in Ennis Rakestraw. Now, here's the thing about him. he does have potentially in their eyes, and what they view him to be is someone who could play a role similar to a Darius, like compared to potentially other top target corners that would be more nickel, right? Be more in the slot in that role. They project that maybe you get a cornerback that could be in the mode of an outside corner who can really be a dog, really be a force. And they obviously are getting super, super old in the secondary. They don't have many safeties that I truly believe in. I like Sidney Brown, but he's got a long way to go. I like Reed Blankenship as a third safety option in a rotation. Bradbury's cooked. Darius Slay still has some left in the tank, but he's obviously on the back end of his career. You need to look at your secondary. I just think it goes against what Howie Roseman believes in. You know, there is a report out there that, hey, the Eagles have a ton of interest in Snead. And yeah, that would be fantastic. If you go that route and you don't end up drafting a corner instead, you look to get creative or you look to find other ways, whether it's a trade, whether it's traditional free agency, go get playmakers. Well, they did that with Darius Slay, right? I mean, that's what they do. It wouldn't be the first time that they make an acquisition like that with their secondary. That's their bread and butter normally, right? Like, I don't know if it was the swing and the miss on Sidney Jones that scares them. They'll take flyers for other secondary pieces like Rasul Douglas or Avonte Maddox. You know, you look at those mid-round picks, or they go with the big names from Alabama that doesn't get drafted, and then they try and snag them super late, or maybe an undrafted free agent. And you also have to remember that they have Isaiah Rodgers left in the holster, if you will, because of the whole gambling situation with the Indianapolis Colts, and they're going to shove him down your throat with optimism, with positivity. This is our guy. And maybe they're right by the end of the day, but I think that does influence where they look in the first round. The crazy part is with Ennis Rakestraw, he's not the only cornerback on a lot of these mock drafts, which surprises me heavily. USA Today and Pro Football Network have Cooper DeJean from Iowa also potentially as their first round pick. I don't know if they're going to move him to safety. There are reports that maybe he's more of someone that gets transitioned into safety and all. I don't know where that goes, but it does blow my mind that there's a lot of reporters, there's a lot of media members that are going through their mocks and applying corner to the Eagles. And I don't know if they actually have information, if they are getting news, if they are hearing things, if they are talking to people and communicating to get sort of a pulse on what Howie Roseman is actually thinking this season, or are they just using their brain and thinking, well, the Eagles have issues in their secondary. They're getting old. They have to figure out what to do with Bradbury. So just naturally and organically, you'd think you try and plug in someone super young that you could build with for years, and then you have that stability with a young corner to really move forward with. And there's a big difference there, right? Because you would think as an outsider looking in, and as I mentioned, Daniel Jeremiah, who did his for NFL.com, he was once part of the Eagles scouting. So at that point, you think that you have some insight or you still have some relationships with people in-house. I value that. But if you're outside and you're more just doing mock drafts from a surface level and 1,000-foot view of a lot of these teams, it can be an obvious decision to think you go corner, but Howie Roseman moves differently, okay? He operates in a way that we are not accustomed to, and he's bizarre. He goes with the trenches. He goes with the defensive line. He goes with those positions, and I don't mind that from a general sense, but at times you got to realize what you have, what you need, and you have to weigh it all out. You can't just constantly go to O-line every single time. And offensive line did make a couple of these mock drafts. A different NFL.com piece has Amarius Mims, who's the offensive lineman for Georgia. Go back to the Georgia tape. Go back to the Alabama tape. Go back to SEC football. You know, I don't have an issue with that, but you better be finding the next Jason Kelce. You better be finding the next Lane Johnson. And this is no disrespect to some of the other offensive linemen that they have. They still do have a damn good O-line, no matter what others try and say, because I've heard that throughout the entire offseason. Their O-line isn't that good anymore. Now, their O-line's amazing. Their O-line's fantastic. We are used to elite offensive line play, and maybe they're not the super, 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 super elite, but they're still good. Very, 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 very good. And there's a lot of poor O-line play everywhere. Go look at what Cincinnati had to deal with under Joe Burrow's tenure for a little bit of time here, huh? Go look at what Eli Manning had to deal with his entire New York Giants career. Well, it's getting ugly now, even more so, right? With Daniel Jones and the back end of Eli Manning there. That was something. That was something. And they actually put stock into it, which is the craziest part about it. They just failed tremendously, and it's insanity. But my point is, you can't draft with where you currently stand an O lineman in my eyes that'll just be good. Okay, it can't be good. It needs to be rare elite. I could live with rare elite that will be a Lane Johnson type of step in, which is a very hard thing to find, by the way. But that's where the talent needs to be for me to acknowledge and accept you going O-line with everything else that needs to be sort of polished right now on your roster. You also had the offensive tackle for Oregon State, Fuaga, and this is courtesy of CBS Sports. Apparently, he's very good at run blocking, has an upside as a pass blocker, but could be the eventual successor of Lane Johnson. I guess we're doing this, right? Because we've been saying this for Jason Kelce for years. Oh, he's eventually going to hang him up. Well, here's Cam Jurgens. Well, here's Landon Dickerson. Here's Isaac Seumalo. The list goes on and on and on, and all these names that could potentially slide in when Jason Kelce's gone. And it took 3 or 4 specific draft picks until we're finally in a position where we think Jason Kelce is going to hang him up, but we still have no idea. And the reason that's important is because I don't want this to be a scenario where we're talking ourselves into maybe moving on from Lane Johnson down the road and he might walk away. And now Lane Johnson, I believe, has been open about saying he still has some years left in the tank. But if we're now going to go through this, let's say hypothetically you do draft Oregon State's offensive lineman and you think that maybe he can slot into right tackle with the ability to also be a guard and then slot him in the guard at some point, whatever. 2 years from now, are we drafting Lane Johnson's successor? Like 2 drafts from now, it's like, oh, well, Fuaga from Oregon State ended up being our right guard. And then now we're drafting someone we think will be better at right tackle with our first-round draft pick, and he's going to end up being Lane Johnson. Similar to Jason Kelce. I can name you 4 guys that we thought would be Jason Kelce's guy, and then ends up not being Jason Kelce's guy because Jason Kelce's still here. And then, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have all these weapons like Landon Dickerson, a Jordan Mailata, even though he was a super late draft pick, or Cam Jurgens. I want to have a lot of meat and potatoes, and I want to have a lot of substance with my O-line and in my trenches in general on both sides of the football field. But I just think at some point, you could be doing an overload. There is an area, a gray area of you're doing too much here or you're reaching too much, and they probably want to reach too much. They think it's a good philosophy to let's just keep targeting what we know works. When Andy Reid was here, he set a foundation. We want to build within the trenches, and we'll find other areas to get solid. We'll find linebackers, whether it's a high value, and I'll say that with air quotes because Nakobe Dean doesn't look like he could play right now. He can't even get on the field, let alone I have no idea what he can actually do when he is on the field. He seems to be overmatched early in his career here, which, makes sense from a young youth perspective. But, I mean, you're going all in on thinking Nakobe Dean's going to be your guy moving forward. That's crazy. And my point is, you may go find some pieces with value, like a 3rd, 4th, 5th round pick and all, but dude, like Davion Taylor never played football on specific days because of his religion. We think he's got so much more left in the tank. We like the value, and ended up being that Davion Taylor couldn't play. We can't be doing that. So we got to make sure that we have structure with our draft picks and actually use our brain and not do an overload in the trenches. We got to find that happy medium. That's all. We got to find that happy medium because we have a lot of work to do on that defensive side. And maybe you go into the free agency market. We know that there's a few guys from Miami that might end up being free agents, specifically at linebacker. I'm drawing a blank on his name. But forgive me. No, it's on the tip of my tongue. I'm not going to get it. I need to find it. That's just going to bother me. But there was a potential piece that I saw about Vic Fangio getting his linebackers from Miami to Philadelphia here. Oh, come on, man. I know his name. I know his name. Miami Dolphins linebacker free agents. I know his name. I'm going to find it. I'm sorry. I apologize. This is bad content, so I apologize on my end. Van Ginkel. Van Ginkel. I almost said Van Sumeren, because remember Van Sumeren came in at one point. And it was like, who the hell was this guy? And then that name was flirted around a little bit. All right, that's on me. All right, we'll get back on track here in just a second. But some other names that were potentially thrown around: Nate Wiggins, who is a cornerback for Clemson. That was the Draft Network. So multiple different corners from Iowa, from Missouri, from Clemson, a couple offensive linemen, one from Georgia, one from Oregon State, and then Yahoo Sports, Byron Murphy from Texas. You don't know where Fletcher Cox is going to be by the end of this. You don't know where Brandon Graham's going to be at the end of this. Hell, you don't know where Hassan Reddick is going to be by the end of this. So if you can really try and grow with some very young, solid talent like Jalen Carter, the fan base isn't necessarily happy with what Jordan Davis provided from just, I guess, from an in-shape standpoint and from a production standpoint. The one play that constantly gets bobbled in my mind nonstop is when he was running as hard as humanly possible for that size of a man to chase down Josh Allen in that game against the Bills. I've never seen a man that large go that fast and make that level of play. And it seemed like from then and from that play, like he just broke down. Like he must have gave it 7,550%. Where he had to go to Pep Boys. You know, you say you got nothing left in the tank. People use that phrase all the time. You got nothing left in the tank. Well, yeah, I mean, you got to get your engine checked. You got to get everything checked. You got to see if the fluid is proper. All of it, the whole nine. You got to get 4 new tires. You got to rotate the tires. You got to do this. You got to do that. Your brake pads are gone. There's a word that goes with the pads there that I just had to get done with my Chevy Colorado. But that also needs to get checked. I mean, seriously, that's what it seemed to happen with Jordan Davis. I'm not ruling him out by any means, but if you can insert a Byron Murphy in there and he can help out the Milton Williams, the rotation, so you can continue to throw guys in there. And I like Fletch to death. I think he still has tremendous amount of skill left, believe it or not. He was pretty impressive to me last season. I did not expect him to thrive the way that he did. I think you can make the argument that it's time just to move on and let others step up and be leaders. And, you know, it kind of ran its course, and maybe it's time to say goodbye to Fletch, BG, and instead of like if you bring it back with Kelsey and then Hassan comes back and he still has a year left on his deal, but we know there's controversy surrounding the contract and what he wants. And he's opened the door to talk to other teams. Howie Roseman, that is, allowed Hassan Reddick and his camp to speak with others to see what the market is like. And maybe you get a second-round draft pick, and then you can apply maybe some forward thinking with that second-round pick along with all your other assets that you have. Howie stashes those comp picks so he can start making moves and bottling a few up, maybe a couple 4th-rounders, slide into a 3rd round, go find your value again. You know, we see that nonstop, but it really is something that interests me to beef up that defensive front with new energy, with new pieces, with a new identity. You could also tell me, though, that we want to run it back with Fletch one more time. The BG one is interesting because I don't think BG has as much as Fletch does. Now, maybe BG doesn't cost as much, and if he is in the back end of your defensive end rotation, okay, you also have to worry about Josh Sweat and his payday, Hassan Reddick and his payday, and Howie Roseman obviously does a very tremendous job in that area. That's what he does so well, even if you're not high on Howie Roseman because of maybe picking certain personnel and some of his draft picks in the past. There's one thing that is very steady and very true, and that's he'll find ways to manipulate the cap. Now, you might not like the way that he finds the manipulation, whether that's void years at the back end, whether that's pushing all the money back towards the back end so the cap hits aren't as aggressive early on, which then allows you to build your roster in certain ways and take big, massive swings at it. But with Brandon Graham, if he costs very, 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 very cheap, I think it's fine. And he probably is aware that with his farewell tour that he acknowledged he would like to maybe do at the end of the season, at the end of this disaster that was, I think he could probably find a way. But the more and more we milk this stuff out, as much as I have a very emotional tie to BG, who's been here his whole career, he wants one more swing at it. How do you not reward someone like that who made the biggest play in Philadelphia sports history, the biggest play on the biggest stage to get to Tom Brady when you were begging for a stop and you needed one badly? And it was like, dude, come on, we got to go one stop here. Jim Schwartz getting torched 500-plus yards. I mean, it was a mess, and he made the play, and so did Derek Barnett, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, Derek Barnett deserves a little love. I always say this, and I fight with people left and right. Nelson Aguilar and Derek Barnett, you take away what they provided there in the Super Bowl, it's a big difference. I'm just saying. Not that anybody else couldn't have fallen on the football, but Derek Barnett was there. And Nelson Aguilar had himself a day in the Super Bowl. So for whatever that's worth, okay? But, yeah, I mean, Howie Roseman, he needs to – I lost my train of thought there with how I got sidetracked about the Super Bowl. But, Brandon Graham, yes, and Howie Roseman and how he needs to look at this defensive front. You could definitely probably do it. At some time, though, it's probably time to move on. And it's probably sooner than you would like to think. So maybe you just kind of rip the Band-Aid off with some of these veterans and allow others to sort of be in there, because as toxic as it is right now, maybe the voices have gotten stale. Maybe part of I always thought it could never happen because of what Lane and what Jason Kelsey and all these guys provide. But right now it's so out of whack. And maybe it's just a Nick Sirianni problem. Maybe it was a Brian Johnson problem. Maybe it was a Sean Desai / Matt Patricia problem. I lean more towards coaching than I do veteran players. But yeah, it's just interesting. And it'll be fascinating to see what they do with the defensive line. The reason why that was brought up is because Yahoo Sports has them going with the defensive lineman Byron Murphy out of Texas. So those are some of the names to sort of tie a bow on things. A couple cornerbacks, Cooper DeJean, Ennis Rakestraw, and who was the other one? Nate Wiggins of Clemson. Some names to look for if they do go corner, but I would be stunned, absolutely stunned, if they go corner. I just don't think it's in their DNA. Mims from Georgia, offensive lineman. Fuaga from Oregon State, an offensive lineman as well, or defensive lineman Byron Murphy from Texas. I'm sure there's plenty of other mock drafts out there that you can find other names and all, but that's sort of what popped up in my view as I was doing some research and looking ahead here, the combine, get ready to listen to Howie and Nick speak. So those are my thoughts. Those are my too early draft targets to look at. I appreciate all you guys to death. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me here on Bleacher Report, and I will see you in March.